We are in Zimbabwe, in the town of Victoria Falls, and our guest this month is Rachel Nyaradzo Adams. Rachel, welcome to the Lead Like a Girl podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kudzai.
Wonderful to be here with you. I'm super excited, and as always, guys, we have an amazing, amazing, amazing time. And I will just start by asking you, tell us about yourself.
Well, so I'm Rachel, and can you believe I am 44 years old now? Which is weird because everybody keeps calling me auntie. And I'm like, how did I move from being just Rachel to auntie? But I am a leadership and transformation specialist. Most simply, people call me a courage coach because a lot of the work that I do is helping people connect to their courage, to authentic power, so that they can lead and live more effectively. I was born in a small town in Gweru, so similar to Victoria. Well, not as small as Victoria Falls, but small town.
City status.
City status, but people used to argue, is it really a city, Gweru? Because it's so small. But I grew up, I was actually born in Kadoma, grew up in Gweru, and left Zimbabwe when I was 19 to go abroad to work to raise money for school, and then went to university and then started work in the space I work in.
I love it when people summarize their lives, but you know the good stuff is in the middle. There's some really good stuff in the middle. So tell us about those early years. Who is Rachel and what do her beginnings look like?
So I was born to a single mom in Kadoma, and essentially spent my time between my mom and my grandparents. I don't remember much of that time, but soon after that, my mom got married, relocated to Gweru, and then I spent a lot of my childhood in Gweru. I always say my childhood was, it was complex. It was complex in that I don't know my father. That created a big identity crisis for me as a child. I found that a lot of the times I was sort of looking at myself in the mirror and going, who are you? Who are you? Who are your people? Or where do you come from? And that was always a perplexing question for me. And that created a lot of insecurity and fear. And sometimes even like a dread of life. It's almost like when this existential question isn't answered, sometimes it can create a sense of, what is life really about? Yeah, and often people don't get how deep that can be, but that's the journey. But in other parts, my childhood was like any other childhood, right? I was excited about the things that I was excited about, which for me was books, television, and school. I was such a nerd. Those were the things that I absolutely loved. I found a lot of joy in stories and in learning and in the mind, and in words. Just the other day, a relative was telling me that if I learned a new word at school, I'd come back home and I would start using it in every sentence, just like it doesn't apply. That word doesn't apply. But I loved words, I loved language. And yeah, I was a bit of a serious child. I wasn't as playful as most children are, but I enjoyed my mind, and I spent a lot of time in my mind. And then, of course, had friends, beloved friends, some of whom I'm still friends with to this day. And
lovely. You just expressing your mind and that time of your childhood, you talked about enjoying drama, enjoying inhabiting a story. And I can imagine that. I'm a bookworm myself. And kind of how you can get lost in that. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like, getting to put on a full character instead of maybe where there were spaces and holes you couldn't fill in yourself?
Yes. You know, I must say that I think the role that stories played for me is stories for me were always complete. And I feel like when I went to a book or a story, I could read complete characters, which is the very thing I was missing in my life. I was like, who are these people whose stories are completely written? And even let's say there was a character who had a struggle with their identity. Like I remember playing Elsie in The Pearl of Contentment when I was...
Oh my goodness, haven't heard that title.
I think or something. And Elsie was a troubled child, right? I remember there was a mom, I don't remember there being a dad, and I remember her sort of wandering into the world. And even then, it was like the story had an end. And I loved that. How do people formulate a story that has a good ending? And I think that's why stories and books for me and television for me were so enchanting, is you could go into this other world and then use those characters to figure yourself out. And so I've then always said that books saved me, because it was through books that I started to understand myself better. And then when I understood myself better, I found I became more effective at life.
But you made an interesting choice. You could have been a world-leading actress if you decided to inhabit story, and I believe it. You Oscars, we would have seen all the things. But you didn't choose. You didn't choose acting. You actually then chose to narrate your own story fully. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's interesting. The other day I was listening to Stephen Fry, and he was saying his whole life he wanted to contribute to the world of ideas. And that's where he finds the most fulfillment, is ideas. And I think when he said that, I was like, I so resonate with that, because from when I was very, very young, it was the ideas that I loved. So the stage was interesting and I enjoyed being on the stage, but it was more like, what is the story you're telling and what is the idea behind that story and what does it do for you? And so the more I grew in my career, the more I realized that what really drew me was thinking through problems, helping people think through their problems. That's where the coaching comes in. Facilitation is helping people we start a session saying, our team has a problem with trust. We roll out the ideas, we explore the ideas, we break them up, we do exercises around them. And at the end of the day, people go, oh, I get trust. I understand what trust is. That for me, I then became clear that that's what I wanted to do with my life, was how do you take an idea, a concept, a theory, a philosophy, and use that to change a person's life? And that's possible. You can do that.
Ooh, and so how did young Rachel go from this timid, bookworm, curious, great mind, but possibly not hearing and seeing that outside, to kind of starting to write her own story?
It's interesting because from a very young age, I watched human beings a lot. I watched the adults in my life. I was always fascinated by the adults in my life. And now I know that even then what I was intrigued by was human choice. So why do people make the choices that they make? Especially if those choices make them unhappy. And if the choices if the choices make you unhappy, is it because you couldn't choose something else? And I remember distinctly being 16 years old, and my two sisters, my older sister and my younger sister, and I had been invited to a party. You know, school holidays, there's a party going on. And I remember thinking, I'm about to say yes to this party, but I hate parties. I'm an introvert. I don't see the point. Like, what's the point of a party? What's the point of a club? I don't get it. Like, you all go there, you're trying to talk over each other, the music is loud. It's too much stimulation for me. And I was like, I remember thinking, I'm about to say yes, and I don't want to go. What would happen if I said no? And I remember saying to my sisters, I'm not going. I don't like parties, I'm not going. What 16-year-old doesn't like parties and doesn't want to go to a party? And I didn't. And I remember I stayed back at home and I studied. And I loved it. And I remember thinking, that's what choice does. The fact that I chose something that is true for me has literally changed the way I see the world. So for example, I remember sort of studying. I was like, maybe I'll miss the party. Then they came home and they told me about the party, and I was like, okay, doesn't sound interesting to me, but I'm glad you had a good time. And that for me is how these things started to become my life. Is initially there were ideas in my head, and then I started to go, what happens if you experiment with those ideas? So you keep saying people choose things that don't seem to be good for them. You do the same. What happened if you did differently? And then I just became that person who filtered out everything that didn't feel authentic to me and wanted to experience more of what was authentic for me. And I feel like that's how I started to self-develop consciously. and then became curious about how to help others do that.
Yes, and that journey of choosing the things that made you happy was super successful. It was a few scholarships successful in terms of your focus on your academics. I mean, you might tell me a few other stories. I don't know what it did maybe for a young love life, but that's not the story today.
Not as successful in the beginning. Woo.
But we're gonna focus on where that focus took you in terms of your academics, and there were scholarships that followed, there was international study that followed. How was that success? What was happening?
Absolutely. Went to university. Took me 3 years to get to university because we didn't have money to go to university. So I worked first.
Tell me a little bit more. What work? What did you do? How do you?
I swept floors. I made sandwiches. My first job was in a bakery.
Yeah.
Swept the floor, made sandwiches, then graduated to the till at some point. And then worked as a spritzer girl in a department store.
Would you like to try this?
Would you like to try Calvin Klein? Eternity by Calvin Klein was a big thing at the time. And I spent a lot of time at the Calvin Klein counter. Did a lot of that. Helped my brother with a startup business. He was trying to start I think it was a nursing agency at the time. So did be fielding calls for him. And until I'd raised enough money for my first year at university, which was actually a beautiful thing because when you pay for your own university, you also have a lot of carte blanche around what you choose to study. So I was like, nobody's telling me what to study. I'm going to study what I want to study.
Money.
And I walked into an anthropology class by accident because I think I was trying to get to a sociology class. And I walked into an anthropology lecture and literally heard the first few lines. Professor Sally Frankenthal, I never forget it. Yeah. And she was talking about societies and how we construct ways of living and doing to basically protect what we see as valuable socially. And I remember thinking, wait, this is it. And I chose anthropology. I remember I had an uncle who was in banking. He said to me, not only are you unemployable, you will not be employed because nobody will know what to do with you. Nobody will take a chance on you. And I said, that's fine, but it resonates. The thing resonates. And so what do I do if the thing resonates? And so I took a chance and studied anthropology, and true enough, and I think this is the reward that comes with being courageous and honoring who you are, is with that anthropology degree came the scholarships. I mean, I was so good at it that I think the universe was just like, just help this girl continue, right? Because then the money wasn't always flowing. And then after that, I was on scholarships and UCT, then went to Oxford, and after Oxford, worked for some of the leading organizations in the world. I was hireable. Yeah. I was hireable, and I think it was because I allowed my mind to develop based on its natural bent. Right? I allowed my mind to follow its interests, and because of that, I became very good at that. And I got rewarded for that.
That's amazing. So, I mean, we could have been talking to Dr. Rachel Adams, and you could have chosen academic life and been incredibly successful. What happens? What happens with what you're finding out about yourself? How did we get here?
Oxford whooped my behind. Let me just
right.
I went to Oxford, did my master's, and I said, I never want to have anything to do with academia after this ever again. I think I've read enough books in my life, and I've had enough of it. I mean, truly, that's how I felt at the time. I still love academia, and I think if I had a chance to go and do a PhD, I would still do it, and I have thought about doing it.
You heard it here first.
I have thought about doing it. I have thought about doing it for sure, because I still love, for me, academia, learning, books, everything to me. But I think, it's interesting, and I think this is part of courage too, is at a certain point I became aware that the choices I was making were because of the prestige they held. So it can become addictive. So I've been to Oxford, and then I worked at Alan Greover's Foundation, and now I'm at McKinsey, and now I'm at Yale, and then now you're doing like this big brand thing. It was wonderful work, it was good work. It wasn't my most honest work. And I remember thinking, my most honest work actually isn't about this brand thing I'm doing. My most honest work is I wanted to gently help people come back to themselves. And that has nothing to do with degrees, and that has nothing to do with accolades, and with, it really just was like, I want to have an opportunity to sit with a person, to sit with a group of people and speak to their souls and to remind them of the power that resides within them. And I love the definition. I think it is Paul Tillich actually who says that power is the intrinsic drive of every living being to reach its full potential internally and externally. I'm paraphrasing. But I thought to myself, what would happen if we live in a world where people are connected to that intrinsic drive? So it's not about I'm choosing things and I'm following a career because everybody said I should do it, or that's what makes me successful, or that what gives me status or ambition. But because this is who I am and this is what serves me and the world better.
Yeah.
That's the work I wanted to do. And I was like, that has nothing to do with a PhD. A PhD would be wonderful, but I don't think that's, I think for me, that soul to soul connection is not an accolade connection, right? It's a can you be with human beings and sit with them deeply.
Can I ask a question for those who are potentially, I'm going to use the word trapped.
Yeah.
Trapped in their success, maybe?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question for those who have made a choice and are barreling forward and are now have dependence and expectations and are going not where I'm supposed to be, but the momentum is taking me. How on earth do they find the space where they return to themselves? I love the word that you use the word gently.
Gently. So interesting. The other day I was talking to a woman who said to me, her parents drove her into accounting because they said you'll be successful. And you know, parents are often solving for, we don't want you to be a dependent until you're 50. So please go get a job that actually pays you some money. But because they also care, they care for you. And she said she went into accounting, and when her parents died, it's like she, for the first time, had permission to go do what she loves. So she walked out of accounting and she went and started doing work in psychology, working with children, which is what she'd always wanted to do. I think a couple of things happen. First of all, let me say this. Sometimes practicalities in life, we need to think about those things. We need to do what needs to be done to feed the children, right? And to do the work, well and good. But I think the thing I find saddest about people who have, in many ways, betrayed themselves is, number one, you never touch your genius. I know too many mediocre accountants, too many mediocre doctors, and God forbid you end up with a mediocre doctor, because that's your life, right? But I've come across a few, and I'm like, why are you doing medicine? You have no business doing this. But you have a genius. There's something in you that is brilliant, and you've never allowed yourself to touch it because you're chasing ambition. That's the first thing. The second thing is the world misses out. The world is missing out on the beauty of the gift that you could give the world. You are missing out on the beauty of the gift that you're missing out. The third thing is, one of the things I find sad is then I come across people who are schizophrenic within themselves. I don't mean schizophrenic in the medical sense. I mean, you now are living out 2 or 3 identities. Right. And that creates chaos in a person's system, right? So you hear people consistently say, you know, there's this thing I've always known I should do and I regret. And what happens when we live in regret? We churn out a whole bunch of other emotions, sometimes guilt, sometimes shame, sometimes a sense of disconnect from ourselves. And so people get sick. And so for me, and I think the last thing I'll say, by the way, is people think I think we all live in this idea that if you're a serious person in the world, life is hard. And if you're a serious person in the world, work is hard. And so we ignore the stuff that comes easiest to us.
Right.
And we think we can't make a living out of it. So when people used to give me feedback initially that you're a good listener, and when you listen to people, you allow me to really speak my mind. I remember thinking in my early years, okay, so what does a person do with that? Like, what job is that? Initially I remember there were times in my life when I wanted so desperately to be told I create good spreadsheets, right? It's like, that's the kind of feedback I need, right? It's like, your spreadsheets are great because then I can be a serious person in the world. Because I never thought you could make a living doing this. And the world is braver now. We are seeing more of that. Yeah. But when I stepped into this career, people were like, you do what? Leadership who? Coaching? What
Is
is
it a team?
What is exactly like? And I'm so glad that I had the courage, I cultivated the courage to step into the lane that I had business being in. And too many people are in lanes they have no business being in.
Yes, this is good. This is really good. I am just, yeah, honestly, I think of those people, one, that do find themselves, disconnected, not finding the right space.
Yeah.
What does it feel like in the groove? What does it feel like when you're sitting and you are and you spoke about really living out the essence of who you are, and taking up that space in an affirmative way where people cannot but deny. I mean, it's you, can't be anyone else.
Yeah. It feels like you're in harmony with the essence of your soul. It's fascinating because your biggest collaborator becomes your soul. So I find that all the ideas that I generate into the world, all the keynotes, all the facilitation, even the way I design workshops, a lot of it is me having a conversation with my soul about what are we trying to do with the people that we're walking into a room with today? What have they stated as their problem? What else do we know that they won't say? To the point where sometimes when I walk into workshops, in fact, let me not say sometimes, almost every time I've done a workshop, people after that say, "Are you sure you're not in our meeting yesterday?" Or somebody didn't record notes for you. Because literally this is the conversation we were having yesterday about the things. And I don't know that. In fact, a lot of the time I prefer to be very thinly briefed so that I'm not biased. Sometimes, if I can, I don't even want to know people's titles. And I find that when you work at that level, there's just, there's a resonance, there's a deep connection that's happening because you're in flow, right? What Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in his work calls flow. Yes. The brain and the body are so connected that it's like you're dancing. And whether you're doing that as an engineer, as a doctor, I love television, so I watch medical dramas all the time. You see those surgeons and their music in the background and they're like taking out the little bones in the spine. That's flow. Yeah. And all of us can touch flow. But you have to do the work that you came to the earth to do. Ooh.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna get in trouble because I'm getting into this. It's really good, it's deep. You had graduated with honors, you had worked corporate, you had success. And then you were saying, actually, that's not my flow. That is not what I was created for. So what does it look like to make that decision? Yes.
That decision actually is what has become the basis of the book that I've just finished writing. Is that courage actually is it's a path that you walk onto, and each path has a section, right? There's some work you have to do on each part of each section of the path. The first piece is I had to just acknowledge who I am. Yeah. So I remember the essential self. I remember saying, I'm not a corporate animal. This stuff bores me. Like, I'm not even remotely interested. But I knew it was prestigious. There's something prestigious about walking into a room with a business card that everybody understands, right? Yeah. So if you walk and you say, this is my business card from McKinsey, nobody asks you any questions.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. And I started to acknowledge that this was not for me. Actually, I didn't care for all of this as much. I cared for the work, but I didn't care to be a corporate animal. So that was the first piece. The second piece is I started to think about the losses. I said, so if you leave, what are the things you're afraid you're going to lose? Because remember, when you are going to make such a bold decision, your brain is going to trick you. Because the brain doesn't like those kinds of changes. Too much energy. We're using too much energy here. So I literally started to write a list of all the things I was afraid to lose. The business card, the corridors of power, the access to networks that I had. I remember even writing down loss of medical aid.
Hey.
So it was a big, lots of people staying jobs because of a medical aid.
Yeah. Pension plans.
So I wrote down this entire list, and then I started to make peace with it. Okay, so you're going to go back to Zimbabwe. You realize there are 18-hour power cuts at the moment. I hadn't lived in Zimbabwe for 15 years. I was like, I got it. So are you ready? I got to be ready. So I started literally what people do on vision boards. It's a visioning practice. I started to envision what would it be like when I'm in an 18-hour power cut? How will I mitigate that? What will it mean for when I don't have medical aid? And surely I came back home, got my medical aid, and in the second year they canceled the medical aid and said we no longer service individuals. There's a time in Zimbabwe when medical aid wasn't servicing. It was more lucrative to service companies. I didn't have, so literally every day I'd be like, I hope I don't get into a car accident because I am going to be screwed if this happens. So the second was coming into relationship with those losses.
Yeah.
The third piece was really around how do you connect with a new tribe of people who speak your language? Because when you've walked a journey with people who are conditioning you to speak a particular language, that voice is going to be very strong in your mind. And if you don't start hanging out with your tribe, you are going to keep having the seduction to go back. So I really started to find people who are in the same space that I was, who basically affirmed what I was thinking, and then started to figure out how this business works. I won't preempt the other stuff so that you can buy the book when it comes out. But the point is that it's a very conscious process that you go through of acknowledging and honoring who you are, of calculating the losses, and then choosing to step into a new flow that is actually your flow, your stream of consciousness that makes sense for you. It's doable, it's possible. And for me, one of the most liberating statements I've ever read is when Paulo Coelho in The Alchemist says, when you, I'm forgetting the first line, but it's when he talks about the universe conspires. So when you want something, when you deeply want something, when you deeply desire something, the universe conspires to bring it to you. And what I've experienced on this journey, and what many other people who did what I did, who I've spoken to experience, is yes, the universe always conspires. It's not as scary as you think it is. And COVID taught us that.
Yeah.
A lot of people started to make a choice that was really about honoring who they were.
Yeah.
And now we've just got much more evidence that it works. It can work.
Including not having to go to the office 5 days a week.
There you go.
Choices that really served people and who they were.
Absolutely.
Sure. Rachel, you said something around, the universe conspires. You take a step of courage and it feels like these things come and meet you in a way that you couldn't have imagined before, when fear was kind of standing in the way. But the reality is, you look at the Zimbabwean context and you're like, how? Are you truly successful? Have you chosen a smaller success? What is the actual reality of being in Zimbabwe? You came just after COVID or before COVID?
No, 2015. So
before COVID. So you've seen the full gambit.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
It looks wonderful. You know, the thing I've always said is gifts don't have geography. So we must be careful to be too clever about how we're constructing our lives, right? So only if I'm here am I going to be successful. I know lots of people who are sitting in countries where for all intents and purposes they should be successful and they're not.
Yeah.
But we often oversimplify what success means and where you can find success. And for me, gifts are more powerful than context. They're more powerful than geography. So I've been blessed in honoring that and understanding that. And I remember when I first moved back, I remember thinking, okay, so maybe I should go back to South Africa because that's where I'd come from before I'd gone to the US. And I remember being so clear in my mind and in my heart that I was being called to go back home. And I work across the world. I work across the world, I speak across the world, I facilitate across the world. A lot of my clients now are actually not even on the African continent. A lot of them are outside of the African continent. But I'm doing it from Zimbabwe.
Oh, gifts have no geography. That is amazing. Is it possible to be wherever you are and find that essential self and not need a big move, not need a change of address, actually to find the success and the courage to live in that.
Absolutely. One of my favorite teachers, Caroline May, says some of us are going to be mystics without monasteries. She's a mystic, right? And the truth of the matter is that your gift lives inside of you. And so when you decide to wake up to it, it was always there waiting. It doesn't matter where you find yourself. My epiphany to leave corporate happened while I was in the middle of a business meeting in Kigali. I was busy like hobnobbing, talking to people. And I remember literally, it's like time froze. And I was standing in the middle of the room and I was like, why are you here? Why are we still doing this?
We're not going to the party. That 16-year-old girl was like, wait.
Exactly, it was exactly that. Why are you still doing this? So the beautiful thing is, I feel, is that every one of us will always have a nudging. Your soul will always come back every once in a while and remind you, I'm still here, I'm still here, I'm still here. Are you listening? It will come and nudge every once in a while, and one day you will listen. One day you will have to listen, and once you've heard, you can't unhear. And context, geography, where you are, has nothing to do with all of that.
And you found a way to help people here and find a way through that. Tell us about your coaching.
So when I started Narachi Leadership, my first decision was to think about, how do I want to do this work? And I remember thinking, I want to create a sacred, safe space in which people can have all of the conversations they've ever wanted to have, but didn't feel like they were safe enough to have. So whether I'm talking to a team, whether I am coaching individually, whether I'm on a stage, it's how do I create a gentle space in which people can have their toughest conversations. And so I've set it up in that a lot of the themes that I'm discussing aren't always the themes that you tend to discuss in leadership development. So for example, ontological leadership, which is the leadership of being versus doing. So how do we live in our bodies? How does your body is a part of your leadership. You're using it all the time, but are you aware of the way you live in your body and what archetypes live through your body? Emotions, how do you live in your emotional ecosystem? How do you use that? So that's one piece. I use a lot of neuroscience, the brain-body connection. How do we understand our internal world from a brain perspective? Actually, we've got 3 brains. A lot of people don't know that, because your head, your heart, and your gut are all brains. So how do you, for example, make decisions using all of those brains? I use systems thinking, which a lot of the time looks at invisible dynamics. So for example, if you have, in your company, your HR director keeps being fired, or the role just doesn't work, there's an invisible dynamic there. Something is happening in your system. There's pain that hasn't been acknowledged. Right. What is the work we need to do around that? So for me, I decided that I wanted to bring the deepest conversations I could to organizations, to individuals, to communities, so that we stop like skirting on the surface, right? And tick boxing with workshops and facilitations, and we actually don't shift the goalpost. So my clients will tell you, when I facilitate, one of the things I'm very serious about is, if you brought me here to tick a box, it's not going to work. Because usually my first workshop is a courageous conversation. Let's name the elephants in the room. What's unnamed? Because that's the only stuff I'm going to work with. I'm not interested in working with the stuff you think is safe to name. And that's how I work. Is I'm interested in just what is the most important conversation you're avoiding. That's the conversation we're going to have.
And that is amazing. You're being invited to do that internationally, in companies, in small teams. Are you working with individuals as well in terms of the journey?
So I used to coach. I used to do one-on-one work. In fact, that's the question you'd asked, and I diverged from that. Yes, I used to do one-on-one coaching work. At the moment, I've stopped doing that. You know, one of the things that's interesting about coaching that has surprised me is that a good percentage of people actually don't want to do the work, but they want to be heard. So they want to talk about their problems.
Yes.
But when you start to get to the solutions, you start to see people go, I'm not ready. I don't want that. I'm not ready for that. And it made me realize that coaching might not be the space of the greatest impact.
Right.
Because people surprisingly don't actually always want to heal. You'll be surprised. People become addicted to their problems. It becomes a big part of their identity. And so they come to coaching almost to affirm sometimes their suffering. Do you see why I'm suffering? And do you see that the suffering is legitimate? Okay, now you've affirmed that I've suffered. And then I'm like, okay, so what are we going to do about it? And once you start touching the solution space, I find a lot of people shrink back.
Right.
And a lot of us don't realize how much we've so identified with victimhood, so identified with it, that we don't want to not be victims, even though we claim
We don't want to do it.
So during COVID, if you don't mind me using the example, one of the things that I found fascinating is people kept talking about social justice. And then at the end of their sentence, they would say, but these people will never change. And I was like, okay, so what are we doing then? So if you fundamentally believe people will not change, why are we talking about social justice? Because then it's not possible.
Right.
You have to say, I want social justice, I believe in social justice. How do we help each other change? Then I know you're serious. But if you start with people will never change, you're not serious. And that's a lot of what I sometimes hear being played out in coaching conversations that can make it difficult to coach.
Yeah. I'm deeply challenged by that, like in a way that I shouldn't be, but I am. I'm going to be vulnerable and honest. I wonder if some of the success in team is because there are clear goals that people are looking for. And there has to be a functionality. You know, we can't carry on being dysfunctional, otherwise we don't meet the clear goals. And so that's directional. Whereas as an individual, I actually look quite successful having such a wonderful coach like you. And if I don't deal with my stuff, people can't necessarily see that. And the dysfunction I'm causing, not only in my own life, but the people around me, is not getting resolved. And it's not so visible that maybe that work is not getting done. I think that's an amazing insight. How do we find the courage? Because I think that's what listening to you, reading about you, for me has just been incredibly inspiring. How do I get into the work? I think at Lead Like a Girl, we believe that the power of community gives us an opportunity to do the work. Because like you said, how do we change? How do we move ahead is our question. How do we lead like a girl? Some of us don't lead like a girl, some of us do, but if we have a community that is looking for positive, balanced leadership, then we need to do the work. So, how do we get to doing that work well so we can see the change?
Somebody said we heal in community.
Believe it.
So my sense is just being in community and opening ourselves to community and allowing our hearts to be broken by what we see in our communities that doesn't work is courage. And it creates more courage, and that courage becomes contagious. But also, I think we find courage by understanding that courage is available to all of us. Courage is not a thing that lives in the air. Courage is a thing that lives within us. It is a part of our inherent, it's a birthright actually. It lives inside you. The problem a lot of the time is people are trying to live out forms of courage that are not their courage. So for example, I see a generation, for example, that feels pressure to be a millionaire by 22. And so they're trying to be courageous as an entrepreneur. And not all people can be, we can't all be called to be entrepreneurs. No. That can't be true.
I have the sense we're also not called to be courageous and be OnlyFans girls that are raising millions in hours with ridiculous activities. I'll leave it at that.
There you go. And so we watch what's happening outside of us and we say, that's what I should be because that's what courage looks like. To find courage, you have to go into the quietness of your soul and look at your life path. Your life path will teach you. It will show you what kind of courage you hold inside of you. Because if you start watching your life, you will see where you were most alive. Where was I most alive in my life? If I track the 6 times, the 10 times I've been most alive in my life, where have they been? If you can name those things, you found your courage. Because that's where it lives. So whether you're a music composer, whether you cook food that heals people, and I literally mean heals people because food heals people, right? Or you are the kind of person who teaches powerfully and beautifully, or you're a brilliant accountant. I mean, my partner is an accountant, and he says the numbers speak to you. Know, when he talks about numbers,
You get excited about it.
if I love, it's like he's talking about his lover. I'm like, that would be me. That would be me, my friend. But literally, he loves numbers.
Yeah.
And the kinds of courageous things he does in organizations speak to that. They speak to that love. They speak to, he wants to go to the spreadsheet, he wants to go to the budget, and he wants to figure out where we are getting it wrong. I could never do that.
You don't love them,
I love numbers. So go back to the moments when you're most alive, and for sure, that's where you'll find your courage.
Ooh.